This is the Property Secrets Podcast, presenting respected author, commentator, and speaker Darren Standish, providing insights into the hidden secrets of real estate and building wealth through property.
Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Property Secrets, the show where we speak to experts from around the country to give you an insider's guide as to how you can profit from buying, developing, or investing in property. And this week, it's my pleasure to be joined by Chris Duncan. You may or may not have heard Chris Duncan. I've actually started listening to some of his podcasts, and some of the stuff he talks about is really not only inspiring, but also really insightful. And he's actually got some useful information on not just how to think to become successful. It's not even about successful in property or successful in business. It's also just successful in life. And it's not just about how to think to make that happen, but it's also about how we can actually, step by step, how we can go about making that happen and implementing in our life, I suppose. So thanks, Chris. I really appreciate you joining us today. I wonder maybe if you can just give a bit of an understanding of, your background and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. And thank you so much for having me on the show. I know that someone like you stepping out and helping people, out of the goodness of your heart, you're doing a great thing, and people need free information like this. So listeners, make sure you subscribe to this. Darren's a great guy, and I'm just honored to be here. So look, I'm really nobody. I'm just a guy that made some decisions and has been able to create some pretty cool success in some other people's eyes. So, I've got 2 number 1 best-selling books. I travel the world speaking, and I'm very lucky now to have multiple companies that have done over 7 figures. But I think the biggest thing that I'm most proud of, actually, Darren, that I really love, is out of all of that, I got my freedom. And so a lot of people I see, they might go get 20, 30 properties or start multiple businesses, but they miss out on the most important thing, which is their time. And so the most thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that I get to wake up with no alarm clock. I get to go down. I live in Tahoe, North California now, and I've got some property in Melbourne, and I'm from New Zealand originally. And that's what I'm most proud of, because here's what I want all listeners to get right off the bat. Today, I want to talk about freedom. And I want everyone to know that right now, wherever you are, as soon as you hear this, it's the youngest you're ever going to be. And it's your job to take some action and to move and understand is that there is so much great information out there for free, just like this podcast. And it's up to you to put your old self behind you and make some moves. So really, Darren, I'm so grateful to be here. I hope that I'm able to deliver some value to your guests. And I really hope that they're subscribing, listening to your podcast. So again, big thanks for having me along. And I look forward to sharing some tips, or maybe some things.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, no, that's really inspiring. And obviously, that's, I suppose for obviously this is Property Secrets, and we're trying to understand, most people here are probably, they've already decided property is their thing, and obviously everyone has their thing, and right, business or property or shares or whatever it happens to be. And a lot of my listeners are like, property is their thing. And, how do we try and implement some of your strategies on the whole freedom and how we can enjoy the life we want? How do we sort of niche that towards the world of property? Did you have to have a different mindset for property, or is it the same mindset regardless of whether it's property or shares or business or whatever?
I think that's a really interesting question. And most people miss the point. In my opinion, most people are after financial freedom, but then they go and make buying decisions that go against financial freedom. So let's start off by saying this first. What is actually freedom to the listener? Because most people don't understand this. So when I ask someone down, I say, so what is freedom? How much money do you need to earn to get freedom? They usually reply with this. They say, I would want to replace my income. Now, the thing is it's not actually your income that you need to replace. So the first thing that I would say to everybody is to implement freedom, you must start off with the end in mind. And most people don't even know their end. And honestly, the truth is that to get freedom, you just have to cover your expenses. So what most people do, Darren, is they've racked expenses way up here. They're so high, so much higher than what they actually need. So the first thing I want everyone to understand is there's 3 markers you want to get. The first marker I call freedom, financial freedom. And that is nothing other than you've got your expenses covered. That means you do not have to turn up to any job, any work, any boss, nothing. And that's the first one. So I call that financial safety on the path to what the next place is, which is financially free. So if you think about like your base that you need covered, so you cover your car payment, you cover your house payment, your kids, and you've just got everything covered. That's financial safety. Your first goal is to figure out how to get that done. Now, honestly, for most people, if they really brought it back, you know, $60,000 or $70,000 a year is enough to cover most people, just so they don't have to work. But most people go, that's crazy, Chris. I want the $1 billion. The first thing is this. Your time is the most important thing. So number one goal is just to get that done. So you don't have a job, you're safe. Then the second thing is you become free. Now, this is what's interesting, is I normally just triple someone's safety, and that's freedom. So if you think about this, listener, if you had $180,000 or $200,000 coming in a year and you didn't have to turn up to anywhere, you're pretty financially free. Now, most people go, no, that's crazy, Chris. I need millions. I need all this huge thing to actually, no, you don't. No, you don't. You actually only need a few $100,000 coming in per annum completely without you having to turn to work. And you can do pretty much anything that you want. And then there's the third level, which is financial fulfillment. And that's what everyone truly seeks. But here's what I believe is that people try to go to that financial fulfillment, having so much money, $500,000, $1 million come in with anything, that they overwhelm themselves. If all they did, and if all you did, listener, and the first is begin with the end in mind and go, okay, where I want to get to is I want to have the millions of dollars, I want to have boats, I want to have all these things. But Chris has told me is that I need to first have this first thing and just get my time back. Because once you get your time back and you're completely safe, then you can work on getting to financially free. Then you can work on financial fulfillment. And there's these 3 levels. So that would be my very first tip, Darren, is to actually think about begin with the end in mind and then to break it down step by step. Because property is brilliant. And you can become free very, very, very fast if you actually start off the right way. The second thing that I think that translates very, very well across is this, is I want every listener to ask one big question. When you look at your goal, who is somebody in your environment, who is somebody that you hang out with at least once a week that has achieved what it is that you want to achieve? And if there's nobody, then there's a problem. If there's nobody that I actually hang out with, Darren, that has got that I want everyone to understand is this, is don't wait for it to be perfect. Way too many people just wait to start their business or start their property, start their investing for the market to be this beautiful, perfect, amazing thing. And the truth is this, is that you've got to get in the game. You've got to get in the game. Like for me, the reason why I've been able to create this success, before my 30s and been able to do all these things that I've been able to do is because I got in the game so early. I've been in the game 11 years and building businesses and doing this because I started when I was 17. And so I'm 11 years deep of building, but I've been in the game that long. And so I think people get caught on two sides. Either they do this, they jump in with no study, or they just overthink and overthink and overthink and overthink. So those are my 3 big tips that I really want people to notice what translate across. Is number 1 is actually think where you want to end up and then break it down into those markers. Number 2 is make sure that you're surrounded by the right people. And if you don't have somebody in your environment that you get on the phone to once a week or once every 2 weeks, find that person, find them right now, and really start to take action, get in the game, because you're never going to become good in any sport or in any endeavor just by reading books. And that translates across massively. But, there's a lot of reasons why people don't start.
Yeah, I love the way you've just simplified it so much. I think I totally agree with you. We've broken it down to 3 steps, and it seems ridiculously simple. But the crazy thing is that I think just probably not even just in business and property, people just make their lives more complicated than they need to be. And so obviously they create all this complexity. When they break it down, it is, why am I actually doing this? I quite often, I help people with selling properties and developing properties and a whole pile of it. And they quite often come to me saying, hey, I need to sell my property, or I want to do a development. And then the first thing I usually say was, why? Oh, I just need to sell it because I need the money. And I'm like, but why do you need the money? Oh, because I want to do this. But why do you want to do that? And so when you actually start breaking it down into why you're doing things, it makes it a lot clearer purpose. And sometimes, I talk to people that come in to sell their property and we just say, hey, well, why? It's not even worth selling. You could develop it, or you could hang on to it, or you could rent it out, or there's so many other options. If you understand why you're doing it, then you can actually understand, whether you should be doing something. I think that's probably, people just, I'm not even sure where people get ideas from. It pops in their head and then it sticks in their head. And I suppose probably my question for you, and maybe this is probably me learning as much as the viewers, but how do people just get rid of all that clutter and all the complexity and all the complications? They just, do they just try and just stick with your 3 steps and just keep like a mantra every day and just say, okay, just ignore everything else, but these things I'm trying to achieve? Or how do you, there's just so much complexity in life and distractions and the next shiny object. So how do we go about that?
Well, there's a lot of questions there. And I want to start off by saying the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And so if you make a change in your health and just make it simple, if you make a change in your relationship, just make it simple. Like most things have, and Tim Ferriss calls it the minimum effective dose. Most things have this small 80-20 rule, this small 20% or 10% of things that if you just know that, then it takes care of nearly all of the results. But what people are trying to do is they don't understand. I don't know if the listeners know this rule, but it's called Pareto's Law. Basically says 20% of the things you do give you 80% of the results. 20% of the clothes you own, you wear 80% of the time. 20% of the people in the world have 80% of the money. Like there's just this rule that seems to show up in nature. And here's what I think that they miss is people get the 20% and then they spend all of their time trying to perfect the 80. I'll give you an example, when it comes to buying property. I mean, if you can just look at some of the 20%, and maybe you could share what the 20% are for somebody who wanting to invest in a property. If they just get that right, that's good enough. And you can start, because really there's only 4 or 5 metrics in business. There's only 4 or 5 metrics that actually count. There's only a few things, and you can look at every area of life. So if you look at your relationship, if you know the 5 love languages and you know which one your partner truly does, and you make sure you invest in that love language, that's more than the 20%. If it goes to relationship. If you look about it in health, there's a few things that really matter. It matters about what you eat for breakfast more than most of the things you do during the day. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you just focus on just these small things. In Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, he talks about just the very small things, the tiny things that you change. And I kind of made that my philosophy. And so if someone's out there and they're wanting to sell their property or go into property, what tends to happen is they take what they take from their job, trying to make everything perfect. And they think that it has to be this big thing. But the truth, if they just master just 20%, they're going to get 80% of the results, and it's going to be so much faster. And do you see that? They're trying to chase the rest of it. They're trying to chase all this other little bits of perfection. And I think the big thing that it all comes down to, I think overthinking comes down to a massive fear of failure. That's what I think it comes down to. And I think this is the belief that sits in their head. It says, if I think enough about this, then I won't fail. But listener, I want you to write this down. Failing to fail is failure itself, because if you don't go and learn and fail, you're not beyond your edge. And that's the biggest problem is we try to do this. And just imagine this for a moment. We function only out of our past, right? So we function out of our past because that's the only thing our brain knows. Our brain only knows where we've been, not where we're going. That's its only experience. So our brain has this past, and then it tries to do something new, basing everything on the past. And this is the biggest challenge as I see people in every area of life, they literally aren't understanding that when they hit that comfort zone level, it's nothing but newness. And so here's the biggest tip that you got to have is you must have somebody in your life who has achieved what it is that you want to achieve. Like Darren, for example, have somebody there. They've either two things. They've either achieved it themselves or they've helped other people to achieve it for other people. And they have real, visceral, physical results that you can see and you know that's working right now. You have them and you just hand it over to them. You say, look, you show me, you teach me, because clearly my past doesn't line up with the future that I want. Therefore, I need somebody who lives in this universe out here, and you're going to help me. And so that's my big thing. And then just trust, massively just trust. And you said something else. You talked about shiny object syndrome. And I know I'm covering so much ground right now. And listeners, this is just how I roll. I just talk extremely fast and things just pop in my head. So I apologize if it's going too fast for you. But here's my deal when it comes to having shiny object syndrome. If you don't know what that means, listen, this is what it means. It means you see one thing, and then you jump into another, and then you see, oh, this network marketing opportunity, oh, maybe I should do renovations, or maybe I should do this, maybe I should do this. Write this word down, underline it, highlight it, mastery. Mastery is so important. You need to pick what's going to suit you. So what I want you to do, listeners, I want you to look at all the different options, because you can buy and hold, you can go for cash flow positive, you can go for negative gearing. My opinion, that's crazy, but you can renovate, you can develop, you can start a property, you can do all these things. But I want you to ask yourself this: can I actually see myself mastering that? See, for me, is I have people do my property for me. I wouldn't master it. My brain is like this. I love starting business. I'm too creative. For me, if I was going to do property, I think I'd screw it up there. I have a lot of property that I own and that I control, but I have somebody else who's a systems thinker, who's actually there doing it. So when it comes to shiny object syndrome, here's the first thing I do. Take time to figure out which area you want to master. And then when you choose it, I want you to set a stop loss. A stop loss says this: I will continue until this point, and if I haven't hit this much in revenue, I will completely relook at what I'm doing. So for example, whenever I start a new business, I have a stop loss. Within 6 months, if I'm not doing $10,000 a month profit, 6 months, then I know that business isn't something I should continue. And I also say any business I start, I must continue for 6 months, or I haven't actually given it a good go. Having that rule, Darren, really makes me think about stuff that I start, because I know that I'm spending 6 months in this. It's my rule, and I tell everybody that rule, and so therefore I can't jump out of it. So it's a stop loss in both ways. It stops you jumping around, and it also stops you staying in something too long. So I've stop loss in every area of my life. In fact, even with my wife, I've said this: if we had 3 months in a row where we were completely unhappy, that's my stop loss, and I have it everywhere.
Okay. So I'm sure she, have you told her about the stop loss? She's happy with the stop loss?
She is. She goes, well, if we haven't figured out how to get ourselves back to that for 3 months, yeah, maybe we do need to look at it and have a figure out what.
I suppose that gives you an interest. You get to 2.5 months.
Same in health, same in everything.
If you get to 2.5 months and things aren't working out so well, you put that effort in to try and make it happen before the 3rd month happens. So that's the cool thing about that, to having a time to make things happen. You know you're going to make it happen. So yeah, I understand. It makes sense. So one thing I just wanted to touch on, you were talking about the 80-20 rule and all that sort of stuff. I think where a lot of people go wrong too is they think they master everything. And they, likewise, if, with its property, I want to do developments, or I want to have a rental property, or I want to, renovations or whatever. The problem for that is that you're never going to master everything, really. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to have brain surgery. I'm going to go and work out how to operate on myself. And, it's at some point in time, you have to sort of sit back and say, okay, well, I can't master everything, and I'm going to have to trust someone. And, sometimes, I know with clients, at the end of the day, you have to try and explain the logic behind it to people. But then at some point in time, they just have to trust you. And my advice to people, not necessarily if they're just using me, but using anyone, at some point in time, you have to take the leap of faith and just trust that person can do the right thing. So how do you have a sort of a gut feel of how you decide, because you would be doing the same thing with your rental manager or whoever it happens to be? Do you just go on gut feel, or how do you determine who you're going to trust and who you're not going to trust?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I look at a few different things. Number one, obviously, do I like the person, and can I trust the person? And typically what I do is I will pay them and consult them before I go into any sort of partnership with them. So for me, I go through this testing period where instead of going in and doing, I'm just going to start paying them, and I'm going to start on something small. Because here's one thing that I know, and I'm going to add to this, is the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So one of my big things is I ask them about their family, I ask them about their health and their life. And a lot of times you can see an insight into somebody, how they're going to treat you in a relationship by how they treat their spouse. You can see by how they stand up to other people treating them bad, how they push through. And I love finding people who have had an experience with a person that they dislike, and then finding out what it is they disliked. And a lot of times I find that I love somebody and I want to work with them because I found someone who disliked them, and I disagree with the person who dislikes them. And so I do a lot of research. I'm not going to jump straight in. So I will look at what people are up to. And this is when I'm looking for somebody who's actually going to be there to help me in some area of investing, especially if I'm going to invest money with them. But the biggest one is this, if I'm going to have somebody who's doing something, I just need to see that they've got results, and that they're going to also be backing up what it is that they're going to do with results. So all of that being said, you never know until you get in the game with somebody. And so you really do just have to trust your gut. But for me, the 20% that I mastered, Darren, and I think this is super, super important, is I believe the 20%, no matter what you're doing, is being able to be relatable to people. and being able to read people and being able to communicate effectively, make decisions. And this is in the 20%, because what I see too often is fish trying to figure out how to fly. And you see this person like who's just never going to be any good at doing something, but they try to learn it themselves. Because here's this thing, especially men, if you're listening, we think we can do it all. We think I can learn that. I can learn that. Truth is, why would you want to? You're never going to have freedom if you learn how to do something. People always ask me, Chris, how have you got this business, this one, this one, this one, this one? You know, how does this work? And usually my answer is, I don't know. I've got this team that does it, and they're way better than me. You should just talk to them. I don't know how to do it. And that's something that's really brilliant, is I know that the 20% that I focus on the most is understanding people, influence, building relationships, and really being able to create partnerships. And so for me, Darren, my 20% doesn't focus on any strategy at all. So my 20% that matters the most to me is my mindset, my psychology, the way I'm interacting with people, the way I'm reading people. I've never said this before on a podcast, actually, so it was a really good question. Is I think too many times people are trying to learn how to do it all themselves in any area, and they're not working on the 20% that really, truly matter. And it really comes down to this: money going out versus money going in. As long as money coming in is higher than money going out, you're good. Then you just keep on doing that. And you can build out business after business or portfolio after portfolio as long as money going out is less than money coming in. So I keep things really simple, man. And
I love how simple it sounds, and I love the fact you've just broken it down to us. And again, the things you're talking about just don't apply to just property or investing, or it just applies to life as well, and our mindset and the way we think about things. So, so from today, what I really want to take away, I suppose, for me is the 3 points you mentioned. Again, I want to make it really simple for the listeners so they really can understand too. It's about getting your freedom, which is about trying to just cover our expenses at the end of the day. And obviously, the easy way to try and cover your expenses is to lower your expenses. The less expensive you've got, the more chance you've got of trying to cover them. So I think that's probably a first start. And then after that, you can, and likewise then surround yourself with people that are mentors, I suppose, or not, they don't necessarily have to be your mentor, but just by being around them makes them become mentors, I think. And then probably, then just to do something, So I love the fact there's just 3 steps that, that can really apply to our life, but also our property investing. But I suppose just before we go away, because I know you're a pretty busy man, but how can we, this is obviously called Property Secrets. So, what's something that people, and most of the things you're talking about today are property secrets, I suppose, because otherwise, if people did know about them, they probably would be doing them right now. So, but what could you sort of think about that would, as far as property goes, that you consider a secret that people haven't latched onto yet, that's going to really change the way they think about property?
You need to think as property as a business. And too many people don't shift into entrepreneur thinking. The biggest myth is that you're going to buy a property and you're going to have to clean toilets, or that you're going to have to do the renovations yourself. Too often I see people start in property and they take their employee thinking and they just create a new job. And suddenly now every weekend they're stripping walls or going and looking through the paper. Here's what I want everybody listening to understand, and I saved this right to the end, is you must shift out of time for money. You must. If at any moment you're trading your time for your money, you're in the biggest risk ever. You can't take time off. If you get sick, who's going to look after your family? And you've got to have everything done around you. And so the biggest thing that I would say is, the biggest secret is never look to do it yourself. Look to build a team. Look to find the right lawyer, the person who's going to go find you the best property deals. Find the person who's actually loves to do the renovations. Build a team, because that's how entrepreneurs think. And you need to think yourself as a property entrepreneur, not a property do everything yourself, because that will not get you to freedom. So that is the number one secret that people miss, is that they just keep on trying to learn more and do more. And I see it so often. They trade their 9 to 5 for a 9 to 9 or a 9 to 9, 7 days a week, and they don't even love what they're doing. So that is the biggest secret, is become a property entrepreneur, not a property employee.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time today, Chris. Just before you leave, I just, obviously it's been some gold really here today to not just change the way they think about property, but also change the way they think about their life and their mindset, I suppose. If they want to hear more things about what you do, what's the best way for people to try and get in touch with you or find out more about what you say?
Yeah, go to my website. I've got two, www.christophermduncan.com, and I'm sure they'll be in the show notes, and also freedombusinessbuilder.com. And of course, you can just find me on Facebook and everywhere else. There's a lot of free trainings and free things. But one thing I want to share with everybody is if you want to get into property and you want to do it, make sure you subscribe to this podcast, because I see the lineup that Darren's got coming in and it's phenomenal. So do yourself a favor, make sure you subscribe on iTunes or on his blog so you can get every single one of these, and don't miss anything, because the easiest way for you to get information right now and have that person who's already done it in your life is this podcast right here. So make sure you do it. And thank you so much for having me on, bro, friend.
Cheers.
Really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Chris. Thanks, Chris. And I look forward to keeping an eye on your podcasts and seeping on the internet and stuff. I'm constantly learning too, so I really appreciate all the stuff you're putting out there.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
This has been the Property Secrets Podcast with Darren Standish. Learn more at propertyprosperity.com.au.